without them concurrently strengthening this, like we talked about, and what happens?
Around the same, but the floor puck's only going to be flexible.
Yeah, you're going to have instability all over the place, and you could further injure the person. You know what I mean? So that's why, you know, like therapies like mat therapy and muscle activation therapists, like straight up mat, and massage therapy and chiropractic, sometimes they get rid of that tightness, so to speak, or they mobilize the bone, or they move the spine, or they move the shoulder, or whatever else, but then they don't go through and create, they don't have the muscular habits and practices to then create more stability so the body accepts the change that we're trying to provoke.
Which is frustrating because people will come back from recovery and be like, oh, all better.
Exactly.
And it's like, no, I'm not.
It's better for a sec because all of a sudden that stress is alleviated, but then the muscular habit is what?
Yeah.
Right? We haven't changed anything. So that's where like we're calling this corrective exercise, but we're taking it a step further is that we're looking, it's not just what's short and what's long, right? You can't just stretch and strengthen, that's it. But you're deactivating and lengthening a lot of the short muscles, you are strengthening and activating a lot of the long muscles, but there's got to be a center, there's got to be like an equal ratio of work on both so that it all happens at the same time. Because otherwise you're going to be constant tug of war back and forth like this. So like Steph with her back and me with her hip or me with my neck or whatever else, we get into these habits and come forward like that, and then we're not creating those right structures. Okay? All right. Just let the phone go. You're okay. So for the next 40 minutes, because we got to get through this.
That's okay. I was Judy. It was about 4 o'clock. The 4 o'clock, so she's not coming. She's coming at 5.
Who's it? Oh.
Brad Lauren.
Okay. And then I have my console. Okay. So let's carry on. All right. So the other joint that we have to talk about before we get into the muscle structures is this one, scapulothoracic. Okay.
Is that what prevents the shoulder blades popping out?
Yes.
Yes. Yep. So scapulothoracic is it's called a non-physiological joint, meaning there's not any ligamentous structures that are binding it together. It's basically an anatomical junction.
Is this?
It is, yeah. So it's right here, so that it sits right on the backside.
So it's this.
It's the whole border of this scalp, right along here. So it's this whole. It's this connective tissue pulls this in and stabilizes it when we do arm motions. So it's the entire proximal border of the scapula right against the rib cage.
What did you call it?
Scapulothoracic.
No, what did you said it's proximal? No.
It's an anatomical junction.
Non-physiological.
Non-physiological joint. So there's no ligamentous articulation. So there's no ligaments here. So in every other joint, you've got ligaments. This doesn't have it. Okay? And basically what that is because it's just there's a really strong bone there, and it is connected in your rib cage by connective tissue, probably fascial planes or whatever else, but there's no ligament structure there.
I like that one the best.
Stephanie likes the best.
I just think it's cool because then I like totally think about it all the time.
Yeah.
About getting my shoulder blades
Yeah.
back.
Like my friend Taylor, her shoulders pop. She can pop them out like it's so gross.
Yeah,
I'm like, if you do look like skeletons, skeleton.
Mm-hmm.
So that just means her musculature there is completely like shut down. They're
Right.
not doing
Right.
that.
So the scapulothoracic joint. So if you look at this, right? And you look at this, right? You can look at this one on page 1. You can look at this page 4. It sits right against his rib cage. Okay. So its main role is to be an anchor. Okay. So its role is to be an anchor for the scapula and to be an anchor for this humerus as you go into overhead activities. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So it provides stability to the glenohumeral joint with overhead activities. And we'll go over what that is in just a sec. So just write that down. Scapulothoracic. Main role is to provide stability to the glenohumeral joint with overhead activities. Oh, I have tape. How nice.
Isn't it for overhead and for like back stuff too?
Yeah, I mean it does support it when you're working posterior shoulder girdle and everything. but its main anatomical function is to slide this way. So it locks against the rib cage so that it pulls the scapula in, and then as you go up, the scapula rotates up as your humerus abducts. Okay?
So you're having a huge breakthrough with that for Mick today, but he still has some ways to go to get it all the way up.
Yeah, because he can get it here, but that humerus can't completely get past the acromion process because he has 40 years of it being like that. We've got to drop it down so he can go up.
I did see that today.
Yep.
It was really
Yeah, he was doing awesome today. Okay. So, and we'll get back to this, because this, very important to this. Okay? So, let's talk about muscles real quick. Okay? So, number one, so when we talk about muscles, there are muscles that connect to the humerus and cause humeral action, and then there's muscles that connect to the scapula and provide scapular stability. Okay? So when we look at, we'll go over the rotator cuff in a sec. When we look at muscles, okay, for the muscles that act on the shoulder girdle itself, you're going to have your traps, your levator, your serratus anterior, and your rhomboids. Okay? So here, I'll go. So it looks like this. Here's your scapula again. Okay? So and then here's over here. Over here is going to be your spine. So here's your head, little head. Here's your spine. Da 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 da. Okay. So on the back side here. So this is going to be your levator scapula. So levator scapula does what? Elevate. Elevator. Okay. I just left the E out. I have no idea why. But that's going to, so your levator scapula is going to elevate this and stabilize your cervical spine. So it's going to stabilize the cervical, like the neck, and then cause that shoulder to go up, that scapula to go up. Okay? So then you have your traps. Okay? We'll go rhomboids first, and then we'll go traps. Okay? So rhomboids go this way. Okay? So if you look at this, I'm going to give you guys something to think about. So if you look at, you don't have a cadaver here, obviously, but if you look at anatomy, the levator, all the fibers run this direction. Right? So it's easy to tell what the function is, right? Because it connects here, it goes that way. And since this is proximal and this is distal, the origin is here, the insertion is here, so it pulls this way. Make sense? Okay, rhomboids. Yeah, rhomboids. Everything goes towards the origin. Very well said. Okay, so there's all the arrows on the rhomboids. Okay, so what's the origin here? It's attached to what? Spinal ribs. Yep. So it's attached to transverse processes, which is the little fingers that come off your vertebrae. So the scapula, this is origin, this is insertion, so it pulls this way. So it retracts the scaps. And it can also, they do run this way, but as they get up here, there is a minor and a major, okay? They do start to pull up like this as well, a little bit at this diagonal. So it also anteriorly rotates the shoulder. So when you retract, when you're doing rows, when you pull together, if your depressors are working, then you can pull like this. But if you're not, then you're going to do this. Okay, so that's why we see people in here that when they row, they come up because their other depressor muscles are not working that well.
How do you do that?
We'll talk about it. So now we're going to go. Now we got our traps. Okay, there's 3 traps. It's shaped like a diamond. I'm going to draw this in black. So you got this. Okay, so they kind of come down like this. You see all the dudes with like gigantic beaky necks, whatever. Then it comes out like this, and then it goes down like that. I'm going to draw arrows here. Oops.
me and Mandy have big
Okay? So,
Actually.
the upper traps do the same thing pretty much as the levator. Okay, so they're going to elevate. Okay, so their main function is to elevate it's the shrug. Okay? Middle trapezius are to retract, but they're more for a horizontal adduction. This way. For adduction. And then the bottom is depression. Okay? So the lower traps, when you guys are doing BTY exercises, you're doing this. Or you're doing opposite leg, if you feel this, kicking in, this is your lower trapezius right here. This, I've never, to this point, ever muscle tested anybody whose low traps actually work. Like, they're never like an 8, 9, or a 10.
Huh.
Very rarely. Middle traps are usually shut down too. So the over-dominance comes in from the upper trap. The levator was pull the shoulders up into a shrug motion. So when we go to do shoulder rehab, when I have you guys do a lot of posterior shoulder girdle stuff, we're working on the middle traps and the low traps, and then also the lower portion of the rhomboids.
Weird, hit one more time. Okay, wait. The top ones elevate or make you shrug, the mid ones retract or horizontal abduction.
They pull you this way.
I
So this is horizontal
think
adduction, this is horizontal abduction. Because you're pulling away from your arm.
mid one.
Yeah.
And then lower, I didn't figure that out.
Huh?
I didn't hear lower.
The lower trapezius depresses the scapula, so it pulls it down.
Okay.
Okay? Now, the one that it's kind of hard to draw. The one that we talked about, that I talked to you guys about, is the serratus anterior. So that starts on the front side here, right? So if this is my body, it would start down here. You have these finger-type muscles that come in, and then would wrap around underneath and hook up on the back side. So the serratus anterior kind of sits, its fibers sit like this, and it kind of wraps around like this, and it actually pulls, because there's where it attaches on the back side here. It keeps this shoulder blade pinned against that rib cage. So if you see the winging scapula, and you have a serratus anterior deficiency, which we see in all little kids, or when we saw it on camera when he was doing push-ups and it was like all the way up here. So that connects basically the inferior angle down here to the front. Okay, and that's why you can feel it. If you put your arm above your head, you can feel those fibers right there, like right under. So here's your pec, it's right here, and you can kind of just palpate it all the way back into that front of that scapula. And it's when you really get it if you press, you reach out like that, you'll feel it kick in. So just move your hand back and forth. Move your hand back and forth. It's right there. Okay? Unless you guys feel it on me, you get it on you. So that causes shoulder protraction, but it also keeps that angle of the scapula against the ribcage. Okay? So those act on the shoulder girdle itself. Right? There's no attachment really when we're talking about where they attach to. There's nothing really over here on the humerus. Okay? All right. We good?